So what I want to show you today is a feature that we don't generally talk about, or at least I haven't talked about, I don't think, in any of my other, and it's this thing called broadcasting. And what I want to do is I'm going to go into broadcasting and I'm going to tell you how to set it up. Now, broadcasting is pretty much what you would think it is. It is the ability for you to initiate a push message to your audience, okay? A bit like email broadcast or text message broadcast or Facebook message broadcast. In fact, what we can do with broadcasting is we can decide what we want to say, when we want to say it, and what channels we want to say it through. And that is where omni-channel marketing comes into its own, or omni-channel messaging comes into its own. So I'm actually going to walk you through creating a broadcast, and I'm going to show you how it works. So what you do is you go over here on the left-hand side, so you log into your ManyChat account, and you click on where it says broadcasting. And these are some of the dummy broadcasts I've done when I was playing around last year. You'll see January of last year, June of last year. I don't use broadcast very often, and this is my own account, so I don't generally broadcast too much from within my James Birchall account. We do it from other places, but not necessarily from here. Now, I'm not going to talk to you about broadcasting from a flow, because that'll actually make a lot of sense to you once I've taught you how to just create a normal broadcast. Because when you see this, you'll go, oh, okay, I understand. And then when you come back and look at broadcast from a flow, you'll be like, oh, I get it. Bear with me. So let's create a new broadcast. Now, this is where it gets interesting. What kind of message do you want to send? Do you want to send a Facebook message, a text message, or an email? Or my favorite, and the one I'm actually going to teach you today, this one, the multiple channels. Now, this is the best, because what you can do with this one is you click on it and it will create you a flow. Now, remember when I came in, I just said, I'm not going to teach you how to use the flow, create from a flow. Well, when you create from scratch, you're creating your own flow, because when you send a broadcast, what you're doing is you're actually pushing a message, whichever channel, which I'll talk about in a sec. And then when people actually respond to it, they're actually going through a flow. So you can either create a flow from scratch, which is what we're doing, or you can go and pick one from somewhere else in your bot and run that. Hold the thought, you'll get it in a sec. So this is what it looks like when you say create a flow. Remember, I said I want to use all three channels. Now, why would I want to do that? Let me see if I can get you a bit more screen real estate here for a sec. I don't suppose you can see it, but I actually do have the, there it is. I actually have the Zoom toolbar obscuring a few things. So this is what it looks like when you create a default 3-channel or omni-channel broadcast. Let's zoom in on this a sec. And let me read that to you. Messages connected to a condition will be sent only to contacts who meet it. See, we don't see that yet, but when we get through this, there's a whole bunch of conditions that you can run. So it's like, oh, I only want to send this broadcast to people, men, or I only want to send this to people who signed up for my report or interacted with this part of my chatbot or whatever. It'll make sense in a moment. Now, this is the bit I want you to really pay attention to. So let me zoom out a sec and let me show you the condition. So when this broadcast runs, so we're going to remember, broadcast is us pushing a button to say, send a message to people. So we start here where it says starting step, and then we hit a condition. And you're thinking, why in the world would we have a condition? Well, because we told it we were going to use 3 channels, Facebook Messenger, text messaging, and email. And you're like, okay, why would we do that? Here's why. Each and every one of those channels has an associated cost, okay? Facebook Messenger costs you nothing, right? It's free. So long as you are within the 24-hour window, right? Now remember, from all the other training, there's a 24-hour window that comes to life every time you engage with anyone on Facebook Messenger within a chatbot. Literally, any time a conversation piece happens, it resets to 24 hours and then it starts to count down. It's like somebody constantly turning one of those sand dials, whatever you call it. But every time they turn it over, it resets to 24 hours. Now, if you don't communicate with that person, the time runs out. And after 24 hours, you can't use Facebook Messenger to communicate with that person until that person resets the 24-hour clock. And they do that by re-engaging with you. So there costs you nothing to send a message through Facebook Messenger, but you've only got 24 hours since the last point of contact to make the message. So if you haven't spoken to somebody for a few days, then you're not going to be able to send a Facebook message. So that channel's not available to you. What's the next channel that would make sense? Well, email. Email has a slight cost inside ManyChat. I think it's $3 for every 1,000 emails you send, or something like that. Or 10, no, I think it's 1,000. Anyway, the costs are in the system. So for every email you send, I think it's like a, well, it's I can't do the math right now. Is it a 3/100ths of a penny or something? Anyway, you can send 1,000 emails for $3. So there's a fractional cost. And last but not least, and by the way, that'll only work if you've allowed the individual to opt in and they've given you their email, right? So that's the way it would cascade. So have we spoken to them in the last 24 hours? Are we able to communicate for free? Yes, no, no. Do we have their email address? Yes, we do. Great. We can send an email. It's going to cost a fraction of a penny. Now, let's say we don't have an email address and it's outside 24 hours. The last and final try is a text message. Now, a text message is about a penny a message. So I think it's 100 times more expensive than an email or something, but it's a penny a message, right? And you're obviously limited to a certain number of characters. So it's the smart play, if you're going to use the text message piece, is to actually drive them back to Facebook message, which of course costs you nothing. So you can use the text message to reactivate the 24-hour window, which is generally what you want to do. Now, look, if you look here, this would say, I'm going to send a message and I'm going to send it to my audience. Now, people in your audience, some are going to be freely available because you've interacted with them in the last 24 hours. Some of them are going to have email and some are going to have text. And what it does is it goes free, super cheap, cost a penny. And what it will do is it will only send using the least expensive route to get it through. But you don't need to worry about it because this whole thing, that's the point of the 3-channel omni-channel broadcast here. Now let's have a quick look. If this was a Facebook message, then all we'd need to do at this point is type in the message here. And you know, that's all we'd need to say. So this message would then get pushed. And I'll show you all that in a sec. If we didn't have the messageability, then we could create one of their emails, right? Now, you could do some very clever things with emails. You can add buttons, you can do other things. Again, if you're really interested, you could also then bring them back into a flow. But let's just say you wanted to tell them about something. So Facebook message, email. And last but not least, you could type in the text here. And that's it, really. That's as simple as it gets. Now, you can get more complicated because what you're looking at is a flow. So you could, remember, you could link all these things together. You could link them to other flows. You could link them back into your bot. And the sky's the limit, what you do here. What you need to remember is this is a broadcast that you initiate by pushing a button, and then it will run this. Sends a message, sends an email, or sends a text. Okay. Now you can see that can get a little more convoluted, a little more clever. You can go from an email to a Facebook message. You could go from text to a Facebook message. You could have all these connect a whole bunch of messages over here. That works too, right? It doesn't matter. But this is the whole point about choosing the channels based on the least amount of cost and what's available to you. Now, I don't want to belabor that point too much. Plus, I'm also watching the clock. I did say 10 to 15 minutes to teach you something. So now let's imagine that this magical series of fields is being filled in, and we sent them a note that just says, hey, first name, just a quick heads up, the latest issue of my super extra cool newsletter is available, or there's some extra cool material I just uploaded onto a course, or you're invited to an event, in town. This is an interesting example, actually. We'll run with that one. You've been invited to an event. Obviously, this is assuming that we aren't dealing with COVID-19 right now. But in a world where you're allowed to go to events, this could be a message that says you're invited to an event. So that makes you start to think, well, what happens if I got 1,000 people in my audience? Some are on the other side of the world, some aren't. It's kind of dopey inviting everybody to an event when only the ones within, say, a 50-mile radius can actually attend. Good thinking. All right, so here's how it works. So once you've written what you want to say and you've coded up any of the messages and so on and so forth, you then click Go Next. You could look preview, but we'll go next. So this is where it comes down to targeting. Okay, so you'll see that you've got all these little buttons, which means that this applies to the 3 channels. Now, there's not much you can do about it here because we picked all 3 channels, so don't worry about that. But targeting says, who's this message going to go out to? Well, if you click on condition, pretty much every option you've got starts to come up. Remember, I was using the imaginary example of an event. So we could use locale, or we could use something else. I mean, you know, anything that we've got in here, we could use. Okay, so that's what you can do. And you can pick multiple conditions to create, you know, take your big group of people down to a target. So let's imagine, just for fun, we'll say, you know, in this example, I'm going to send it to all the guys. I don't know, bad example, but you get the idea. And you'll see, you build them up. And then I'm going to say, you know, all the men speaking British English or something. That's obviously not going to go to that many people in this example, but because my audience has a smaller number, this is my testing play area, but that's how you build it. So that's how you target. Now, let's not worry too much about targeting. I'm just going to delete those. Now, let's focus on scheduling. When does this broadcast happen? Well, I want it to start going now. Fine. So leave that to this. Or you can say schedule or schedule for later. So if you click on it, you can then type in a day and a time. So you can actually set this up for some point in the future. Okay. All right. Simple enough. Nothing particularly complicated about that. But this is where life gets super interesting. Time zone settings. Now, remember, your audience might be scattered all around the world. Well, in Canada here, we've got a difference of about 3 hours. On the West Coast, they're 3 hours before us. And on the East Coast, I think it's a half hour ahead of us. But I'm on, you know, Eastern time, New York time, that kind of thing. Right now, it's 12 o'clock. But over in Vancouver, which is on the far west coast, it's actually just after 9 in the morning. So what's this got to do with anything, James? Well, it's got to do with this. Time zone settings. Let's pretend that you want to send your broadcast out and you want everybody to get it at, say, 9 o'clock in the morning. Fine. So if I say send them all at the same time and I was to send this now, well, everybody in the world is going to get it at different times. Like right now, for instance, it's 12. You know, so on the on the West Coast, it's 9. In England, I think it's 5 or 6 in the afternoon. It's like all over the place. So that's what send all at the same time means. It means literally just blast it everywhere to everyone, regardless of the time zone. Okay. If you click on it, you've got some extra options. You've got time travel and limit sending time. So time travel's fun. If you look, by the way, every time you change anything, the message shifts. So if I was to say I want to send my message at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and every member of my audience is to get it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon according to their time zone, you'd use time travel. Because what it will do is it will shift sending it specifically on that person's time zone. So if I sent it now, it's actually at 12:15, it wouldn't go for 45 minutes to anybody in the same time zone as me. But anyone else, like say on the West Coast, who's 3 hours behind me, it wouldn't go for another 3 hours and 45 minutes or whatever the timing is, because it needs to shift it, right? So that's what time travel does. And last but not least, limit sending time. So let's bring that one up and let me show it to you. Now, messages will be delivered as soon as it's possible so that's like for targeting a window. So let's say I was only going to allow something to be sent between the hours of 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. I want to be annoying and pester you at dinner, right? So I decide I'm going to send it between 4 and 6 p.m. But it also bears in mind time zone. So what that means is it will hold the message over, and as soon as it gets to at least 4 o'clock, it might, it depends where, it'll start sending, but only then that individual's time zone. So what that does is that slides to a window. It's similar to time travel, but it provides you with a window. And as you'll see if you read it, if you're using a sliding window like that, it can sometimes have to force it to do a full cycle before it gets around. Okay, one last thing for me to teach you, and then we're going to go into a Q&A. Let's look at notification. Now, you really want to pay close attention to how you use these, because you can be annoying if you're not careful. We don't want to be annoying. So it defaults to regular push, and you think, oh, okay, fine, I'll leave it because regular just sounds regular, right? No, no. Pay attention to this, because use regular and you could be annoying. Look over here. Regular push will make a sound and display a phone notification. Use it for important messages. But James, everything I say is important. I beg to differ, and I'm sure a lot of people would too. By all means, if it's truly important, use a regular push. If you click on it, you'll start to see there are other choices. Only one regular notification. Let's click on that, see what it changes it to. This will broadcast. The broadcast will trigger one regular notification, the first message in the broadcast, and the rest of them will be sent in silent mode. This is great for when you have two messages in your broadcast, but don't want to send too many notifications. And you're thinking, hang on a sec, James, that only sent one, right? Well, I only allowed it to create one. Remember, it had the decision, and then it said send a Facebook message, an email, or a text. Well, no one said I couldn't make that flow more complicated. That could be an entire sequence. So I could create a marketing sequence that's timed, special, and I'm creating it from scratch. And when that starts to run, I could have it send a text message. Then I could wait, 12 hours, and then I can have it send another text message. Then I could wait, use a time delay, and have it a day later and have it send an email. Like, you can interconnect all these parts, and you can, drag this out. It sends a message. I just allowed it to say one, but I could have easily replicated that 7 times and had it send 7 sequential messages with a controlled delay between each one. And I can have it send a message to start with an email, to go to a text, to go to Facebook, to go to this, to go to that. And I can get very, very creative. But you can have multiple messages. This is where it says only one regular notification. So let's pretend in my sequence, my broadcast, I had 3 messages. Well, this one, only one, means that the first message would go out and it would go ding, and it would send a notice. It would be annoying or whatever. If it's important, it's worth it. But the remaining messages, the 2 remaining messages, would be pushed silently. It would show up on, the phone and all the rest of it, but it wouldn't be going ding. 2 notifications. The first message goes ding and shows up. The second message goes ding and shows up. The third message, silent. Silent push. Silent notification means messages 1, 2, and 3 will go up to the phone, will appear as notifications on the phone itself. When you get a little notification, text pop up or something, that's still a notification, but it's silent, and it won't make any sounds. And last but not least is what's known as silent. This will not put up a notification on the screen. It won't pop up any bubbles. It won't make any dings, and it won't make any sounds. It's entirely silent. So this is great, as you can see, for silently sending content updates. So what you can do is be quiet as a mouse. You can make a few dings, 1, 2, or so many, or, every message that goes, right? That's what regular push is. So if I sent 3 messages regular push, it would go ding, a message would show up on your smartphone, and it would get a notification inside Messenger or whichever one else was going on. So this is great for getting attention, but use it carefully and with consideration. And that, once you've done all that, you hit send now, and it will lock and load it into the system, will filter and target exactly who you said to pick on. It will send it using whichever channel makes sense for whichever members are in that target. And then whatever timing you set it to be, time zones, silent modes, notification settings, it will run it. And that is how you do broadcasting. It is extraordinarily powerful and, perfect for when you want to do certain kinds of campaigning. Now, let's just back up a sec. Remember I said I wasn't going to show you from broadcast from flow? I lied. See, I could pick any flow that I've got in my system, and I could use that to run. So like I said, when you create content, remember, there it is. Look, and I told you can create multiple messages. So I could go from there, or I could pick another message. What's that? Facebook message. There we go. So we've now got another message. So that's going to be one message, then immediately send another. Probably not a smart play. So let me delete that. What I would do is I would say, send the first message. Then let's delay it. And then send another message. Okay, now of course, if this was a, say, 2-day sequence, you might think, well, what I can do is I could, connect that so I don't have to have the smart delay connected multiple times. Well, remember, if it's using text, it's going to run through here. If it's using email, I'm going to have to put that there and then send another email. Where is it? Send an email. And then, of course, if it's text, it would be send the text, smart delay, and send the text. So this is 2 messages. Where's the text? There it is. Let's pretty that up. Whoop, there we go. Now, some of you might already be thinking, ooh, that means that if it was Facebook, I could use a different delay. I could maybe delay it half an hour or an hour. If it's email, maybe I could delay it a day. If it's text, maybe I'll wait 8 hours. And that's, so you get the idea. You can be absolutely creative with what you're doing here. Anyway, there you go. That was about 20 minutes. I compressed this to teach you how to use the broadcasting feature and create, quite literally, can create very, very complicated and complex and nuanced sequences of messaging. So you can use it as a simple, broadcast one message, you're done. It's great, super easy. You saw how I just pushed one button and it just created, and all you do is fill it in. But let's say that you were creating a campaign and you wanted a bunch of messages to go out over a few days. Well, you just add add the messages, put the delay in, and when you're done, hit go next. Targeting, remember, targeting, scheduling, time zones, and noisiness, and then hit send now, and it will lock and load and schedule it, and that's the way it works. So that, as they say, is broadcasting using ManyChat.